Hello. In this message, I wanted to relay the process of self discovery that you would go through as you start to unlayer the densified frequency that you hold around your being and come into later, more fluid form of operation. Possibly how things would feel, possibly how things would be experienced as the density of you starts to change, and then you start to experience the unraveled essence of your existence. The core of your being is very fluid and very nimble, and so your way of living at its core, by design, is very adaptive to any environment and any change and any event, any interaction, any even what we would call larger brushstroke, big events of life, right? We we spend a lot of times fearing change, and we spend a lot of times fearing the unknown and fearing vast vast disruptions to our way of being, right? Our ways of set patterns, um, through multitude of ways, or for multitude of ways. But at the core, your essence is meant to experience the vastness of nuance, the vastness of experience, where you live and you extrapolate yourself into the world. And so the densified version of our being, the densified perceived existence, or kind of like the bubble of self that we create around ourselves, is designed there because we believe that it needs to be there for self-protection. The rigidity of our ways a lot of times is there because through our thoughts of safety or lack thereof, we build these structures in order to pacify or control our environment in specific ways, to make sure that we're safe, to make sure that we have food, to make sure that we have shelter, to make sure that we fit in, we belong, we are taken care of, right? So those key points of survival, out of fear, bring in this rigid structures into our lives. And so sooner or later, the rigidness becomes invisible. We have spent so much time building the rigidness within ourselves in order to make us feel comfortable and cozy within our bubble, that the more time you spend living with it, the more invisible it is the idea to you that you are somehow living in a stuck energy pattern and stuck densified ways of being, because the comfort that you have designed by building these structures or bringing on these beliefs is appeasing your being in such way that you think you can relax in the moment and experience peace and tranquility, when in fact your mind is, basically trying to hide the fact that you are in fact living in fear, or you're in fact living in lack, or you're in fact afraid of lack or afraid of fear. And then so we become rigid. We become very rigid and very stuck. If somebody asks us to participate in something new, we are apprehensive. If one of our children is trying to do something that is outside the norm of this family dynamic, then we're apprehensive about it and we're trying to talk them out of it. And so that protection mechanism that we have established around ourselves, and then the control group that we perceive to control around us, is there masking fear. And so the release of that energy works in a twofold way. So to begin with, if you recognize that you have patterns of fear, that you have patterns of scarcity, of lack, of scarcity, of fear of lack, or fear of scarcity, or fear of not surviving, or fear of not living, right? You can actively recognize, oh, wait, I am propagating a pattern of self that is creating this artificial density for no reason at all. My fear is creating, in fact, more fear, which creates more density, which basically brings in the pattern of non-movement, right? The fluidity of us just becomes non-existent. So one, you can recognize what is it in your life that you're choosing to bring rigidness in. What points you quite literally interpret in this material form, in three-dimensional form, as something that you are afraid of, that you are propagating into this world in order to appease yourself and make yourself feel comfortable just enough to where you can deny the fact that you are afraid about something coming into fruition that this thing is trying to mask. And so I will give an example from my Tanya's three-dimensional interpretation. When I grew up with lack of food, right? The truth is, I grew up with the perception that there might be a lack of food. So there was never actually a lack of food, but there was a fear that there might be a lack of food. My idea regarding food and food comfort and food safety and how much food I have in my pantry now stems, prior to my recognition for sure, completely stems from the idea of the fear of lack. And so that rigidness around food, my behaviors of buying too much or needing to have too much, having a stock pantry, right? Always, instead of getting one of those things, let's get two just in case, right? So all of those things that have propagated over my adulthood years of my life were blind actions, all there, masking the fact that at the core, I'm living in this densified expression that I am afraid there might be lack of food. And so that within itself is a concept that then sets in that rigidness, right? And how it propagates itself is so nuanced and it's so large to where my shopping patterns are different, my eating patterns are different, my saving food for the rainy day are different. My idea around what's on my plate, what the portion size is, how fast I need to eat it. All of those things, as silly as they might sound, come off or stem out of the densified way of my being, where I'm living the pain body of potential fear of lack of food, or the fear of lack of food, right? So kind of like so nuanced that it's almost like 2 times step removed, right? And so if I can recognize that density, right, I can actively choose to start releasing it and surrendering that stuck energy about food or fears of food or lack of food or all the little nuances. I can actively sit and make a declaration into my body that I will let that fear flow through me. I will let that fear of lack flow through me. I don't have to identify how it feels. I do not have to identify what it looks like. I can acknowledge its existence, simply acknowledge its existence, and then post the acknowledgement, spend time to simply sitting there, if you want to call it meditative state, allowing it to flow, allowing yourself to feel what it would feel like, or what does it feel like for me to actually know that I am afraid that someday I might not have food. And just let that flow. It might take 5 minutes. It might take 10 minutes. But I will come back into the implication of that. If the energy is stuck and it's not flowing, everything in your life is perceived through that filter. Everything in your life is perceived through this lack. Your interactions with other beings are through this lack. Your interaction with dining is through this lack. Your interaction with shopping and over-consuming is through this lack. This lack, in my case, for this one thing, for example, propagates into so many areas of my life that it goes beyond food. It goes beyond scarcity for food. It just establishes the concept of potential scarcity, fear of potential scarcity, right? And so that sets in a pattern of operation, sets in this densified being. So as you go through life now in this form, able to release this energy, what you will feel is lightness. Is quite literally you will feel lighter as you sit there and start to release these energy patterns, these pain bodies, these traumas, these presets that you have not been able to let yourself, one, acknowledge, but two, much less release. And so acknowledgement, one, important. Two, post-acknowledgement, true acknowledgement, not like pretense acknowledgement, but the truth acknowledgement, then release. Release the energy. Just allow it to flow. You might have to do this several times as you come around, as you notice yourself going shopping, for example, on my end. I can stand there and I go, okay, well, how many avocados is enough, right? Or, how many whatever's is enough. Do I buy one? Do I buy two? Am I in scarcity? Am I not? And so through the life, as you walk around in ways, in your material way, in your three-dimensional form, where you would be experiencing these triggers, these like the tensiness, and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to buy 5 of those avocados instead of 2. You can start to see yourself through your densification, and then let go of that densified frequency. And then as you work with it through time, you will notice it just dissipating and dissipating and dissipating. And so, grocery store trip number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, you will notice yourself making different choices. You will notice yourself making different observations of, why am I doing this? Out of what am I doing this, right? And so things will start to flow naturally through you. That lightness will come about, and things will just be as is for what they are whenever you don't instill this filter of density on them. And so the discovery of self, the discovery of life experience actually lays through the path of this de-densification. And I've touched on this before, but I think it is important to reiterate this further on. Your essence in actuality of self, in action of self, in actualization of self will be completely different once you delayer all the filters of otherwise. And by otherwise, I mean, the trauma of fear of potentially not having food, right? Let's say if we just run with that example. And so you will allow yourself to have this expanded interpretation of your body without heavy weights everywhere. By simply living from the point of authenticity of self, as opposed to the point of authenticity that is the untruth, right? By me placing this definition on the lack or the scarcity, the mindset of fear around food and having food and potentially not having food, I create within that unauthentic interpretation of my life. Let's say as simple as with food, right? With dining, or with my interaction with money, or my interaction with other beings. And so the authenticity of you and your interaction with the whole of the world, quite literally the whole of the world, will completely change once you start to discover your being and release the density of definitions that were never so, but were perceived to be the truth. So that is a very small, small point, but a very important nuance, is that you will notice your experience be completely different once the densified version of your interpretation of the world starts to leave its place. And so things will just be for what you will be able to see things for what they are, right? You will be able to interpret things for their truth. Maybe for the first time, you will be able to have a different relationship with food, or a different relationship with grocery shopping, or a different relationship with money. And by different, I mean authentic relationship for the first time in your life. I say that knowing that that is what I'm starting to feel as the density of me starts to go away in my three-dimensional tiny interpreted form. But so realize that nuance, realize that it is not a chase to have an authentic experience. It's simply letting go of the definition that is on the top that is causing the experience to carry on authenticity. And so slightly different, but important to highlight and to nuance. So happy shopping for avocados. And thank you.